Hey guys, I hope you're doing very well. Welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be talking about Oppenheimer. And I'm going to be very short to really describe this movie in one word: spectacular, because that's what this movie is. This movie is genuinely brilliant. I could really talk about so much of this movie, what it excels at so well. The story is really well written, the characters are really well acted for the role, and they deliver really great performances. I really, really felt the visuals and the sound effects were spectacular. I mean, I only watched it in a 2D screening. I didn't see it in like any sort of special IMAX screening, but man, the sound, the audio, and even from the visual spectacle of watching this movie is amazing. And there really is a lot I could really talk about this film, so I'm gonna try and do my best to really try and divide this up into sections without really trying to get into spoilers. Now, I'm going to kind of, give a brief summary of this film and kind of the themes that this movie really tackles. So, the movie's real main protagonist is J. Robert Oppenheimer, who is basically a research mostly focusing on quantum physics, and he basically uses his research in quantum physics to focus on implications for nuclear weapons. And the film itself kind of centers around use of quantum physics and development of nuclear weapons, but also sets itself up, talking about war and politics as well. And you're kind of met with lots of different characters in the film that Oppenheimer comes across with his groundbreaking research of developing these nuclear weapons, talking with military professionals. I think one of them was played by Matt Damon, as well as also talking people within like a sort of a Congress room, Senate. That one of them is played by Robert Downey Jr. So there's always lots of different sort of characters that are getting involved in this, film. That it does get very political as well, talking about the use of the nuclear weapons and everything, and using Oppenheimer's research to use it to sort of win outcomes of wars and everything to keep up with Soviet Union after the Second World War to the Cold War. So there is a lot that this movie really expands upon, and I think it really does construct a really strong narrative really well. It does kind of get a bit convoluted at times, but it does kind of at least stick with its themes very well, and it doesn't kind of drift at all. So it's really focused at really delivering a strong themes without really knowing itself. It's really self-aware to really tackle extreme issues as well. That's also happened in history. So I think they've really done that well in this movie. The acting is also really good. I mean, especially from Cillian Murphy, who plays Oppenheimer, and he really does excel in this movie very well. And so many of the other actors like Emily Blunt, Robert Downey Jr., Matt Damon, they also really aspire to role perfectly. And I think this movie really does show that there is some ideas when it comes to new original ideas. Yeah, maybe war movies or political movies are not original nowadays, but something like this with really good storytelling, although like it does get political, you don't really necessarily feel like you're being talked down to watching this film. You know that there is a strong story and a strong narrative that is really being delivered. Now, this movie's runtime is around 3 hours in length, and to be honest, I have complained in the past about movies trying to deliberately pad for time unnecessarily, but this is like the only exception for a movie that I really think that throughout its runtime, it really never felt boring. Every piece of dialogue seemed to really have some sort of real importance to how each scene progresses. Now, sometimes a lot of the scenes that this movie has, it kind of goes back and forth between past and present. So, but there's always different sort of timeline changes that go in this film. I think sometimes it was a bit of a little bit hard to kind of keep track of where the time frame was. But to be honest, I think overall watching this film, you can make sense of where scenes are that don't really feel confusing. You don't really feel confused watching this movie. It does kind of it can make sense of its story very well, that you don't really feel like you're losing track of what happens. So I think they did that, really well from a writing perspective, as well as trying to focus on its plot and setting very well. But also, I think what this movie does excel so well, even for me going to a 2D screening watching this movie, like the visuals and the sound effects were phenomenal. Like really, really good. I mean, everything from a lot of the visuals, like the effects of the use of the nuclear weapons and the bombs being used to detonate. They really showed the spectacle of how that was really being shown on screen and how it was presented. And also a lot of the sound effects of the bombs. Hearing the noise of when they detonate, you could really just hear the sound literally just coming from different sides of the sides of the cinema or the theater completely. It was really, really spectacular and so refreshing to see. You know, most films would typically just have some of the most very sort of basic CGI, very green screen heavy, just very sort of very dull, basic sort of sound effects all the time. This never felt artificial at all. It felt so natural to watch this, and it really was something that felt like I was in a situation of being on like a battlefield or a testing area. It was so spectacular. Now, another thing I do want to also point out before I get into my conclusion is that this movie does have a lot of political stuff that goes on in this film. So certain things throughout certain times throughout this movie, you would also hear a lot of how Oppenheimer is a person who is completely against communism, and he doesn't really want to use nuclear weapons to be sold to communism that could really be used to cause weapons of mass destruction and complete detonation across other sort of parts of the world, because it would also affect how he would feel as a human being as well, how his use of research on constructing nuclear bombs or atomic bombs could be used and affected other people that could be killed from it. And I think the tackling of the political themes is really what I would describe a lot of real powerful messages being delivered, and really expressing those sort of viewpoints very strongly. Nothing really comes across as talked down or patronizing. Like none of those things really ever happen. They really do focus on the acting well. They really get into focusing on interrogation as well, and I think really the how the actors were, pushing that in this film was amazing. It was really well acted, well constructed, and nothing you would ever felt really artificial, or it took itself very seriously into delivering those sort of themes very strongly. So overall, I think Oppenheimer is an absolute must-watch movie. It's not a typical war movie. Don't think this is all about war, guns and all this sort of stuff. It is mostly about using research for nuclear weapons, and it's mostly focusing on drama as well, and also thinking about character relationships as well as tensions between other political figures as well. And I think what they delivered is really, really spectacular. And it does show that for all of Hollywood's struggles, they really can deliver on some really great ideas. And I think Christopher Nolan really deserves so much credit for this movie. So overall, as bold as it may sound, and how highly enthusiastic I am about this movie, if I had to rate Oppenheimer, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. It's quintessentially the perfect drama war movie I've probably have seen for in a very, very long time. I haven't seen one as good as this probably since maybe Schindler's List, maybe. It's very, very rare. I think this is such a brilliant film, and I think for anyone really who likes drama movies, war movies, political movies, I mean, you really have to give this a watch, honestly. If you do have the opportunity to maybe watch it in IMAX and, experience so much of the great visuals and sound effects for yourself, it is such an experience to watch. The cinematography is so perfect. And it really just shows a lesson for a lot of, the typical cliches and nonsense in Hollywood that, yeah, it's very difficult to come up with original ideas. You could have to throw in cliche lines and all this sort of stuff. That is complete bullshit. This movie really does excel on original ideas, really taking the bar so high to really push for great sound effects, visuals, use the way to make realism, how realistic, to be in testing sites to experience nuclear weapons. Even on the screen itself, it felt so surreal. I really can't say anything bad about this movie at all. I really, really love this film. And yeah, that's about it. See you later.